now the director of Sunseed The Journey and today's host, Amrita Cohen.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sunseed Wisdom Talk. This is our number 8 in the series of Wisdom Talks with key thought leaders, interesting, enlightening discussions, and today we have a special treat for you. Before we begin, just to remind you that you can see all of the previous Wisdom Talks, and you can take a look at our special movie of the New Age, Sunseed The Journey, by going to our website, which is sunseed.org. Today, our guest is an exceptional human being whose story has a myriad of tales and twists to it, spanning many decades. Dr. Gwendolyn Zoharah Simmons is a scholar, a historian, a mentor, a human activist, and a feminist. She was an early member of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. She's also a student of Sufism and, above all, a woman filled with joy and love, as you'll see. Welcome, Zahara. I'm so honored to spend this time with you today.
Thank you so much, and I'm honored to be your guest.
Zahara, you are very difficult to characterize because your life has been so filled with all these diverse experiences. For instance, you got started in the civil rights movement way back in 1964 as a freedom rider. You risked your life against your parents' advice and went down to Mississippi. Looking back, what were some of those key pivotal moments that changed your life and set it in new directions?
Wow, well, thank you. Yes, indeed. And of course, it was 1962 that I became a part of SNCC as a student at Spelman College, where I had gone in Atlanta. And the student sit-in movement was really raging. And in spite of having promised my parents, particularly my grandmother, that I was not going to get involved, there was really no way. There was so much going on. And as it turned out, she insisted that I join a church as soon as I got there, having been raised in a very devout Baptist home. And so I joined the Baptist church that was closest to campus. And it turned out to be pastored by Ralph David Abernathy. And of course, I had no idea
yes,
that he was Dr. King's right-hand man, so to speak, and had been very, very involved in the Montgomery bus boycott. And as it turned out, the two of them had returned to Atlanta, Dr. King to Ebenezer, his church, where he had been reared, and Reverend Abernathy to his to pastor the the West Hunter Street Baptist. So every Sunday, I was getting, the word that this was the movement of our lifetime and everybody should be involved. And at the same time, the SNCC people who were my age, many of whom had dropped out of college, they were on campus every day, exhorting us to get involved. And then on my campus, there was Howard Zinn and Staunton Lynn. And I was taking classes and going to lectures, and they were saying the same thing. So I was getting it on all three sides. And all the promises I had made were just broken down. And so, I did get involved. And as you noted, against my parents' wishes, but also against the school's directives. So I was in trouble constantly because of going on demonstrations and sitting in and then getting arrested. And so, name in the paper as an arrested person, which was embarrassing to the school, etc. So yeah, it was really something. Um, I have, as you noted, had many wonderful experiences, and I'm so grateful for all of them. The civil rights movement would certainly be the one I would list as it. I began as a 19-year-older in that, and learned so much about what it meant to be courageous, even when terrified. Uh, Once I got to Laurel, Mississippi, during Mississippi Freedom Summer, I had trained to be a freedom school teacher, and that's what I wanted to do. But as fate would have it, the young man who was to be the director was arrested and made to leave the state. And so the SNCC leadership said, well, you've been to jail and you're from the South. You have to take over. So I was like, oh my God, no, I don't know anything about running a project. And they said, well, we don't have anybody else, so you have to do it. And I wound up spending 18 months as opposed to the 3 summer months that I had planned to spend. And I learned so much about, trying to be a leader in a situation where your lives were literally on the line. And there were 23 young people assigned to Laurel. And so there I was, 20 years old, trying to direct a project with people shooting at you, burning crosses, and in our case, firebombing our headquarters that we had put together and let it burn to the ground, with all of our things inside. And then the second building, because nobody wanted to rent to us, of course. And after so much intervention by people in the community, a second place was rented to us, and it too was firebombed. So it was literally trial by fire.
How did you find the courage to keep going?
I have no idea. I mean, really, looking back, obviously it was God. I mean, I had been raised very devoutly, and I know I did a lot of praying, a lot of praying. And, we lived with families, and the woman and her family with whom I lived was deeply religious, and we prayed all the time, But I really don't know how any of us stayed there, particularly, and how the local people who, we could hop on a Greyhound and go home. But the local people, the people who opened their homes to us, losing jobs, losing homes, etc., those were the truly brave people, because they were putting everything on the line. And in the cases where they own their own homes, they knew they could lose those homes, and people did lose their jobs. So it was really a time, quite a time.
It seems as if your entire life has been a quest to foster justice and diminish inequality. At first, as you said, it was the civil rights movement, and then you became part of the American Friends Service Committee. I don't know exactly what part you had in the Vietnam War, but I know you went to Vietnam at one point with them, and then later you became one of the leaders in the forefront of the struggle for women's rights. So what experiences led you along those paths?
Well, it's interesting, to have worked for 23 years at the American Friends Service Committee. What a wonderful period of my life, learning so much from the Friends, their long history, of peace and social justice work. I learned about AFSC because my former husband was refused to go to Vietnam. He wrote a letter when he got his induction notice, and he too was in SNCC. And this was while we were in SNCC working in Atlanta in what was called the Atlanta Project of SNCC. So he wrote back to the people who sent out these induction notices saying, I'm not going to Vietnam to quote unquote fight and possibly die for a democracy that I don't have here in the United States. Michael Simmons is his name. And of course, he was given 3.5 years in federal prison, which he served 2.5 at Lewisburg. But the Friends had the prison ministry. And I became very close friends with a prison minister, Faye Honey Knopp. And basically, she introduced me to Quakerism, to the AFSC, and I started volunteering with them. And after some years, that led to my actually being on the staff of the AFSC. Going back to the civil rights period, there were a number of us who had a position on women's rights, even within the civil rights movement. And we wrote a statement that a number of us signed that we sent to the SNCC male leadership, protesting the treatment of women in SNCC. And of course, SNCC was the most egalitarian of the civil rights groups, but even in there, there were problems because all of us had been shaped by patriarchy. And so, it was no way for people not to have been acculturated by that. So I had begun fighting for women's rights, and I was one of only 3 project directors in Mississippi, women project directors. And I got quite a bit of flack from some of my brethren. You don't belong, how can you be a project director, because once I took the job on, I was serious about it, and fighting to get the resources that the men project directors were getting. So my struggle for women's rights began inside the civil rights movement.
And then as a professor at Florida University, you became a pioneer specializing in Islamic feminism and Sharia law. And so I guess my question is, how did you, well, I guess we have to talk a little bit about how you became a Muslim, but first let's just focus on your position as a teacher of Sharia law and fighting for women's rights in the Muslim world. I think you went to Jordan for a couple of years. Yes. What is the current state of women today in the Muslim world?
Well, let me go back. First of all, having dropped out of school to after my sophomore year to work full time in the civil rights movement was a tremendous disappointment to my family, particularly my grandmother. I was the first in the immediate family to go to college, and everybody was excited, ecstatic. So when I dropped out to work in the civil rights movement, I really, really displeased many family members, particularly my grandmother who raised me. So when I was working at AFSC, I felt the call to go back to school because I'd only completed 2 years. By that time, I had met Bawa, and I had, taken the Shahada with him and had become, Muslim. But I was also very concerned, even as I became Muslim. I was aware of all the things we had learned about the position of women in the Islamic world. And as a feminist, as a civil rights and human rights activist, this was very concerning to me. And one of the reasons, after finishing undergraduate studies and being invited to join the graduate students at Temple University there in Philadelphia, where I lived and worked for AFSC. Once I decided that I would go to Temple for graduate work, I decided that I would focus on Islam and that I would focus on women and Islam. So that was, the sort of process that got me there. And after completing the master's, I was encouraged to go for the Ph.D. And, that took a while because I was very happy at AFSC. I was not thinking about becoming a professor. But interestingly, after doing some coursework, I really got into it. And then I applied for Fulbright as well as a NMERTA, which was a State Department fellowship. I never, ever thought I would get either. And as it turned out, I got both, which enabled me to go to the Middle East and to live and work and research in Jordan. But with Jordan, being so close to Egypt and Syria and Palestine, while I had written my proposal to just look at the impact of Sharia law on women in Jordan, I expanded that somewhat to interview and do some research in these other Muslim countries. So that's how that all began. And I did spend 2 years there and, fell in love with the region. Almost, people really tried to get me to not go back to the States. They were tempting me with a possible position at the UN, the regional headquarters there. And I said, I'm coming back. I need to go and finish this dissertation. I'll be back. But, I did not get back to live. I have been back several times, of course. But that's how it all went down. Everything has not been planned. I'm so amazed when I look back.
Someone else's plan is working there.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So you mentioned Sheikh Bawa a little bit. So maybe we can just talk about how you got from being a Baptist to becoming a Muslim and then a Sufi, and the role Guru Bawa, Sheikh Bawa played in that.
Oh, yes. If you ask me what are the two most pivotal things in my life, they would certainly be the civil rights movement. And the second one would be meeting the person who is my teacher, my sheikh, Muhammad Rahim Bawa Mahayuddin. Interestingly, I, at the age of 10, had begun asking questions of my minister, of my grandmother, who was, so close to me and deeply religious. But I kept asking her, well, who are we really? And that question, of course, did not make sense to her. And I have no idea why it was a burning question for me. And I said, who are we really and why are we here? And the answers given by my Sunday school teachers, by the minister of our church, by my folk, it never satisfied me. But, they shut me up and I stopped asking, and but it never left me. So really, even while I was in the civil rights movement, I was searching for answers. And it so happened that a couple came to work in the movement, and they were people who had studied with a guru from India. And they were meditators, they were vegetarians, and I'd never heard of meditation, I'd never heard of vegetarianism. And so they introduced me to it and set me out on the road when I was in Atlanta as a member of SNCC, with that whole process of trying to meditate and searching for books. And the one book that they introduced me to was Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda.
Yeah.
And I literally devoured that book. And that was my first real teacher. And so I had been searching in Philadelphia in 1969 and 70, because I moved to Philadelphia in 1969. I had continued my search, and I learned that there was a yoga teacher and that she had studied with a guru. So I took her yoga class at the Y and had begun asking her more and more about what she had learned, etc. At one class, she told us that she had invited a Sri Lankan named Muhammad Maruf, who was a Ph.D. student at the University of Penn, who was a student of a guru in Sri Lanka named Bawa Mahayadin. She had invited him to the class to speak to us about his teacher. So I met Maruf at that class. Maruf brought these little booklets that had Bawa's picture on them and some of his writings translated into English. And he told us about Bawa. Well, the minute I saw Bawa's picture, I was so drawn to him. And Maruf, being a Sri Lankan, wanted to bring Bawa to the United States, but could not get a visa for him or anything as a student himself. So he needed US citizens to help bring Bawa to this country. And so he had the forms with him that we would need to sign for the State Department. And I immediately volunteered. I said, oh, yes, I will sign. And, you had to sign that you were going to be responsible for him. And it was kind of funny because I could barely make ends meet. My husband was in Lewisburg Federal Prison, and I was really living off of friends who had taken me and Aisha, my daughter, in. So I was like, well, if they look at my bank account, they'll know I'm not in any shape to help anybody. But maybe they won't go that far. But there were a number of people who signed on, including the yoga teacher, her husband, and others who brought Bawa here, including the woman, Carolyn Pesolano, who would become the one of the main officers of the Bawa Mahayadin Fellowship once it was formed. So now this was in August of 71, and it happened so fast. I can't believe how quickly the paperwork went through. Bawa got the visa, and he was going to be accompanied by a medical doctor who had gotten a fellowship to the University of Penn Hospital. And so he was coming. He was a devotee of Bawa's, bringing his wife and his sister. So the three of them with Bawa arrived 3 months after we signed these papers. I mean, it was shocking. And so a group of us, maybe 14 people, met Bawa at the airport there in Philadelphia when he first set foot on US soil. And I had an immediate reaction to seeing him. I really saw his light form, as did my daughter, who was maybe 17 months. She saw it first and had her mouth wide open, and she was looking at him in a way that I'd never seen her look at anyone. And then when I looked, all I saw was light emanating from him. So it was an immediate recognition that here was the teacher that I had been looking for since I was 10 years old.
I know we're going to hear from, you're going to read a little bit about from the works of Guru, from Sheikh Bawa a little later today. So everyone be sure you stay and for this teaching that's coming later in the day. But can you just, what particularly resounded in you that what he said or was transmitting?
Well, interestingly, everybody has some idea of what a journey it is from Sri Lanka to the United States. And Bawa was very old. And so when we got to the house, Maruf's house, where he and his party would be staying, Maruf sort of didn't even want us to come in. He said, "Oh, Bawa has to rest." And Bawa said, shushed him, it was like, no, let them in. And so he basically discoursed the whole night. I mean, it was an amazing thing. And if it wasn't, the first thing, I'm sure it wasn't the absolute first thing, but he said, when you're on the path to wisdom, you must ask, who am I? And why am I here? Well, I'd been asking that since I was 10 years old. So, of course, that just, I began to cry. I was just overcome that I maybe was going to get my answer. And certainly I have gotten that answer over so many, many years now. But that was the first, spoken thing. I mean, I'd already seen something I'd never seen in my life, which was this brilliant light emanating from him. But then to sit there and, that very first night, he said to me, "I have been watching you for a long time." He said, "And I have seen you in your little car," and I had a Volkswagen. He said, "I've seen you driving up that mountain to see your husband who's in prison." Now, Bawa's just gotten off a plane from Sri Lanka, and he tells me this. And I'm like, Lord. And he said, he has no business in prison. He did nothing wrong. He said, and I'm going to get him out. Well, here again, I'm like swooning. And I mean, I was speechless. I was stunned. And I was like, what does he mean? He was in Sri Lanka watching me driving up the mountain. So, it was, he had definitely captured my imagination and everything else. I was like, I have a connection here. This is amazing. So that was the beginning. And he stayed in the US with us for 8 months. And I believe I was there every day. I don't think I missed the day, even if I only stayed an hour or so. So it was an amazing coming together with someone who you were related to in a way that at this point I still do not understand.
And he was I guess, a Sufi. And so maybe some people don't know really what is a Sufi, and is that a part of Islam? Is it something different? How did at least he define it?
Well, interestingly, when he first came, we called him Guru Bawa. And then, of course, after Bawa had been here for some months, and, he arrived at the time when there was sort of a guru mania in
Yeah.
the country, and there were many people who were gurus. And Bawa said, I am not like them. I did not come here to make money. I definitely do not want to be known as a guru. So that's, I want to just say why, we
Just
no longer
incidentally,
refer to him in that way.
Incidentally, he came a year after I finished filming the movie Sunseed: The Journey. So he was not in the movie,
Yes.
but he was definitely close to some of the other teachers who were in the movie, like Pir Vilayat Khan and so forth, just
Yes.
as a footnote. Yeah.
Thank you. Bawa, teaches that we must go beyond religion. Now, of course, Sufism is seen as the mystical stream within Islam. And certainly in my studies, academic studies, and beyond, I have definitely studied about some of the great teachers that we refer to as Sufis, Ibn Arabi, Rumi, and so many others. But in Bawa says we must go beyond the four religions, that we have to go into the open space because God is not inside any religion. God is beyond religions. And we human beings have taken the prophets, and he says there were 124,000 prophets, kutubs, and saints that have been sent by God to bring mankind, the human being, back to the understanding of who we as human beings are and what our relationship is to God. And so the religions have divided us, the races have divided us, caste, class, etc. Bawa says all these must be thrown away. But certainly, in terms of how the world views it, Sufism is the mystical stream within Islam, and all of the religious traditions have the mystical streams. As I understand it, the mystical stream is the deep waters out of which human beings have created these religions and made these separations of the prophets and of the religions that are associated with them.
Yeah, thank you for that, because it's always been it's sort of an academic question. But when I made the movie Sunseed: The Journey, we tried to capture as many different streams as possible with the philosophy that all the streams lead to the river, to the ocean, I guess you could say, even more powerfully. And we are the movie Sunseed: The Journey has had a great attraction for many people, and we're just getting ready. I'm just a little secret. We're just getting ready to start on the sequel to Sunseed: The Journey, which is so everybody stay tuned. We're going to talk about that more next month. But what we want to do is follow up on some of the disciples and the followers of the religions, and of not the religions, of the personalities who were in the reawakening that happened in the 1960s, like yourself, and really answer the question, explore the question, what did it mean? What does it mean to have a spiritual teacher and live a spiritual life? So you've already mentioned a lot for yourself. How did having a Sufi master change who you've become today and what you accomplished in your life?
Well, certainly having a Sufi master, having the guide for my soul has, I almost can't even say how it's changed it. I mean, first of all, let me just say, when I met Bawa that first year, you know, I was deep into the movements of that particular period, and very involved in the anti-war, anti-Vietnam War movement, and I said to him, "Do I have to give up my work in the world to come onto this path?" And I was, you know, I was very concerned about that because of my deep commitment to that work. And Bawa looked at me so lovingly and he said, "My dear daughter, you are a small lamp trying to do the sun's work." He says, "If you get what I have brought, you will become a sun." Now, I have been struggling with that for 50 years because, you know, I have continued with the work. As I understand it now, um, you cannot change anything until you have changed yourself. And so, if I, which I certainly do, have the I, the you, the ego, the arrogance, those qualities, how can I create the beloved community that I so seek to create? So I certainly intellectually understood that I had to change, but I think that I now understand it better than I ever have before. And so when I am interacting, as I still am in movements, still doing work, to have the spotlight on myself. How am I doing this work? How am I treating those who I may see as on the other side of the divide from how I think things should happen? I mean, it's the interrogation of oneself. I think Bawa has made it plain that we're not to go sit on a mountaintop somewhere and just meditate. That's not what we have come here to do. That we are, as the Muslims say, God's vice regents. So we are to do good work in the world, but we have to be very clear that our major work is to become human beings, which is the Insan Kamil, the divine beings that we were created to be. And that if we reach that state, we are able to do things that we can't even imagine. So
You know,
that's where I'm at.
I mean, you've done so many amazing things, and you may not, in your own sense, feel that you become that great son, but certainly what you've accomplished in the world, the people that you've spoken to, and as an elder of the civil rights movement, from your wealth of experience that you lived in the past, what can you say to this current generation of freedom fighters so they can be more successful, so we all can be more successful? It's not a they, because all of us on this call at the moment on this are just as much responsible as you or anyone else. What can but particularly, what would you say to the freedom fighters as what they could do to be more successful, to accomplish their goal of peace and equality and all the other things that lack words? It's too many to say.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I'm a part of two organizations, a founding member of the National Council of Elders and an early board member of the SNCC Legacy Project. which is made up of the veterans of SNCC. In the case of the National Council of Elders, our founders were, two of the founders were very, very major players in the creation of the civil rights movement, the nonviolence movement, and that they include Reverend Jim Lawson and Dr. Vincent Harding. So because we have these two organizations, the young people are reaching out to us all the time. And we've had webinars with them. Before COVID, we were meeting with them in person. And what I have said to them is that, and continue to say, is that love has to be the motivator, that we have to love the people with whom we are working in order for them to feel that they can carry out the work that we have carved out to do. And really, you know, I saw that in Dr. King. I saw that in Vincent Harding. I saw that in Reverend Lawson. The tremendous love they showed to all of us as youngsters who they were mentoring, as well as the people in the communities. The work that we have before us today is heavy work.
Yeah.
And we are still struggling with the same issues. You know, we have racism, we have economic injustice, we have all of the problems related to housing and jobs and the police. That has become a tremendous issue today. And so we must organize to change those systems, but we must change ourselves too. And that's sometimes a harder message for people to want to embrace, that we must be the change that we are seeking to build in the world, or we can't do it. So those are the things that I know I'm working on myself still after all these years, still trying to change myself, to rid myself of ego and arrogance and separations based on race and religion and those things. And it is a journey. It is, as they would say in Islam, it is the greater jihad that we human beings have to work on and work with as we work to change the world.
So well said. You know, the journey doesn't seem to end. It's constant work on ourselves. Just when we think we have it, we get reminded.
Yes, absolutely.
We're going to take a few questions from the audience in a couple minutes. If you have questions, please add. But you know, you've experienced so much deep injustice in the world around you. You've seen it so clearly that you put your life on the line as a teenager, a young woman, and you've kept that crusade around the world in many countries, keep going. And seeing that injustice and inequality hasn't hardened your heart. So many fighters and advocates of causes turn bitter or hateful, you know, because when you see the inequality, it's very easy to want to, you know, fight and react against it. So how are you able to stay open and loving?
Oh, I completely think it, I know, not think, that it's due to Bawa's teachings. You know, I actually, that first year, when, you know, I said to Bawa, I don't think I can forgive these people for what they have done to my people. You know, I've mentioned my grandmother. She raised me, and she was raised by her grandmother, who was an enslaved person. And so all my growing up, I heard the stories that Grandma Lucy had given to my grandmother when she was growing up, about the treatment and all of that. So that, had been shared with me. It was a part of me and all that I had gone through, in the movement. And so I said to Bawa, I don't think I can forgive. I really cannot forget. And, Bawa said to me, you will not advance on this path unless you are able to do that. And he was looking at me so intently. It was as if it was being burned into me. And it didn't happen overnight. Let me tell you, it has been a tremendous struggle. I think that going to Cambodia right after the Vietnamese had driven Pol Pot out of Phnom Penh, and being on an AFSC delegation to Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. Being in Cambodia, you see, we saw the killing fields before they were put behind glass, cases. We saw the bones. We saw the skulls, the skeletons lying all over the ground. And we saw that Phnom Penh was a ghost town. And that also helped me to know, oh no, because these were Cambodians killing Cambodians. So it really turned me back toward nonviolence. I said, oh no, whatever flirtations I might have had in my thoughts about violence, I thought, oh no, what we saw there had a profound impact on me.
Yeah, I see that. And as a teacher of Shariat law and dealing with the issues of women's rights within the religion, do you see progress being made? I know you said that in the civil rights movement, you've seen that the kids today don't have any idea about what you all had to go through,
right.
Which I guess shows progress in many ways, but we have far to go yet.
Yes. Well, yes, I have had the fortune of spending time with some of the great Muslim feminists of the world, women from Egypt and Syria and Jordan and Malaysia and Indonesia, as well as, those in the West. And so there's a growing movement in these countries, and it's slow going, but they're clearly making a difference. When I look at the law that was passed in Morocco, the changed Sharia laws governing personal status. Also in Jordan, there have been some changes. In Egypt. So these women and their male allies, because they clearly do have men who are working with them, who see themselves as feminist men. So there is change. One of the things that, is kind of alarming to me is that we seem to be going backwards here in the West. Under the last administration and, with the growth of Christian evangelicals, many of the things that I thought were settled issues are not anymore. So this struggle of women's struggle is a worldwide struggle. And in all the religious traditions, we have this problem. I was able to spend time with Fatima Mernissi, was a Moroccan feminist. And one of the things she has written that I often quote, she said, women love religion, but religion has not loved them back. So it's a struggle, an ongoing struggle in all of our traditions, for women to be accorded the status as of full human beings with all of the duties and rights of men. This is hard. It's a hard fight.
Well, I have one more question. We're still, if anyone wants to jump in with some questions for Zahara, fine. But as a conscious spiritual community, which is what I like to think of many of the people who've seen the movie Sunseed the Journey, who are on this call, who go to yoga retreats and meditation and doing mindfulness retreats and everything else, we have a fairly large community of people around, at least in the West, working in this direction. What do you suggest that we could do to help become more effective toward the situation with climate change and nuclear disarmament, addressing racial and gender equality, and really the struggle even between religions? What would you hope that we as a community could do, and becoming even more inclusive into the Black and the different ethnic communities where you were fortunate. You got to read Yogananda, you found a Sufi teacher, but that's not seemingly accessible to so many people that it might actually help diffuse some of this situation.
Yes, and I have not mentioned Hazrat Inayat Khan, who I guess was my second teacher through his collected works that came into my hands prior to my meeting Bawa. So that had set me on the Sufi path. Just wanted to acknowledge the role that he played in bringing me to where I am now, inshallah. I think that the issues, and I've been working on issues now for 60 years, but underneath it all is we have to respect each human person. The reason that we have so much of the problems we have is because human beings are not treating other human beings like they wish to be treated. I mean, it's simple on the one hand, but it's so real. I mean, if you see everyone like you see yourself, then you're not going to do to them what people are doing. And now, how do we get to that?
Yeah.
That's a huge issue. And, I realize, because I'm out here in the world, that many people really don't want to hear this. They don't want to believe that there is a God. Or if it is one, they would say maybe it's irrelevant to what we're going through now, but it isn't. And so, in understanding that each human being is a ray of God, and is precious and must be cherished, then how could you oppress? How could you kill? You couldn't do it if you believed it. If you really believed that every human being was as precious as you see your own self or your children, etc. And if you also understand that the earth is not to be plundered, that the earth belongs to all of us. None of us own it. And so the grasping and the greed, if we could somehow get our fellow beings to understand this, Bawa often talks about how, you're not going to be here forever. I mean, I don't know how people don't think about that, that you've got a set amount of time here. And so, if you become a multi-billionaire, you have to leave it. You came naked and you're going to leave in a shroud, or, you might have on a gold dress in your coffin. But nonetheless, you're really not taking anything with you. It seems that those kinds of understandings have been lost. And I know this is one of the things that Bauer just hammers into us. You do not own really anything. You don't even own yourself. So that the grasping and the hoarding and the not caring about other people, you have to think deeply about it. You're going to leave it behind. You're here to appreciate it, to cherish it, to nourish it. And then you go on, walk lightly on the world. So somehow we have to be able to exemplify that ourselves, but also to share that. Maybe with our children is the way we have to make sure that they get this, so that as they become adults, they will walk lightly and not have this greed and grasping and doing harm to other human beings, to the animal kingdom, to the earth itself. The earth is our mother. We cannot live without her. And so she must be treated with respect and gently. And somehow we have to get this message across to everyone. And it's urgent now because we're in the midst of climate change. The earth is unhappy with how we've been treating her. We can't live without her.
Well, I think, we all have great hope that the younger generations will be much more receptive to all of this. I guess we have two questions, so let's jump in. Marcus, you are producer. Can you put up the first question? Oh, there it is. Let's see if I can see it. It seems people of peace often die by violent means. How can we, white and part of the oppressive system, be good allies for our Black, brown brothers and sisters?
Oh, yes. I immediately thought of Dr. King being assassinated, and, there are others. The list is long. I think that we all have to be committed to changing our country. And, one of the things, and teaching for 20 years at the University of Florida here in Gainesville, and teaching African American studies and women's studies, as well as Islamic studies, I was shocked often how little my students, in its majority white institution, knew of the history of our country. So, they had no idea that Black people had not been able to vote in my lifetime. I mean, they didn't know that. They didn't know the history of the civil rights movement. Don't even mention not understanding very much about the enslavement period or Reconstruction. So first of all, each of us has to work to make sure that our school systems are teaching the real history of our country. And, we're in a struggle against that. The 1619 Project, we've got Mitch McConnell and others on the floor of the Congress saying that should not be taught. So they don't want the truth taught. I found that with the young people over the 20 years that I taught, they were so moved by what they learned. And many of them were committed to being in movements of our time as a result of that. So we have to make sure that our school systems are teaching the truth. I think we have to also really mirror love to everyone. Make sure you have friends across racial lines, and that you support the movements that are attempting to change our country.
Great, great. And then we have another question from David. What is your understanding of thy will be done? If it is in the hands of God, how do we function with the idea that we have no individual free will?
I absolutely do not accept that idea. I do not believe that at all. I believe that we do have free will. Teaches that, but I mean, I've just seen too much to not believe that human beings have an impact on what happens in the world. Now, if we want to believe that God is behind it all, that's fine with me. But to me, to believe that we don't have free will, given the tremendous intelligence that we have, Bawa says that we have 7 levels of consciousness. So, they begin with feeling, and that everything that is sentient has feeling. Then awareness, everything, all of the insects and animals and birds and you name it, have feeling, awareness, and intellect, their particular kind of intellect. But then for we human beings, we have judgment, we have wisdom, we have divine wisdom, and we have divine luminous wisdom, so that we are able to know right from wrong, clean from dirty. We are creators. God has given us these powers so that we can change things for the good, beginning with ourselves. We can change ourselves and we can change the world, in my view.
Wow. Thank you for an amazing time together, Dr. Simmons. And now we get to hear from a presentation you're going to give us from Guru Bawa, Sheikh Bawa Mahideen. And I'll turn the microphone completely over to you. And thank you, everyone, for the questions that came in. And stay, because we have another special announcement at the end.
Well, thank you so much for letting me read some of Bawa's words. I invite the audience, if you're not aware, that we have a wonderful website, bmf.org, BawaMahideenFellowship.org. And there are many discourses and writings there. But we also have our bookstore, because Bawa did not write, he spoke. And we have over 10,000 hours of his discourses, his lectures. And there's like a little army of fellowship people who transcribe and edit these into many books. So I think there could be as many as 40 books that you can see on our website, and they're coming out every year. I'm going to read something from his Questions of Life, Answers of Wisdom, Volume 1. And it's really my favorite when we would ask him questions and Bawa would give us answers. And so we have a number of books where the questions are asked and then the answers are given. The first question I want to share with you is, Bawa, throughout history, people have worshipped idols, false gods, false prophets. Would you describe the false gods of the contemporary world? Bawa answers, now at the beginning of creation and at the time when man first came into being, God took the forms of the 5 elements: earth, fire, water, air, and ether, and mingled them into the one fistful of earth that became man's body. And let me just say that Bawa says man throughout, but it means human beings. It's not just men, okay? The same elements from which man was made were also an integral part of every created thing. So even as he emerged, man had connections through his own form to the world and to all of the creations. Within man, God can be found, as well as the things which are opposite to God. Everything exists within man: good and evil, heaven and hell, light and darkness, truth and falsehood, wisdom and ignorance. God created the 5 kinds of lives: the earth life, the fire lives, the water lives, the air lives, and the ether lives out of the elements, and gave them to mankind. But he also gave mankind the gift of wisdom, which is the 6th kind of life. That is the life made of light. This is God's greatest gift to man: divine, luminous wisdom that allows man to see that he exists within God and that God exists within man. But man has lost that gift. Instead, he has accepted evil, nurturing within himself Satan's idols and animals, which exist within the earth lives. Because he has lost his wisdom and failed to reach the state intended for him, he has resorted instead to worshiping the images of these things that exist within him. He worships what is opposite to God and acts in a way that is opposite to a true man's actions. When man does this, man is not a man. He is an animal. He may have the face of a man, but he is really in an animal nature. Going to another question. The world is full of evil, wars, bigotry, greed, to name a few. Bawa, do you see a role for social change through political education about these evils? Bawa replies, now in the world, there are 2 battlefields. One is the political battlefield, the other is the religious battlefield. On the one, wars are waged for the sake of politics. On the other, wars are waged over religion and races. People die in these wars. Nothing exalted will ever come of them. In God's kingdom, there is no fighting. God rules over both the kingdom of hell and the kingdom of heaven, giving each of his creations what is due to them, but taking no share for himself. God is one. He proclaims, quote, "My religion is to recognize all lives as one's own life, all religions as one's own religion." End of quote. It is in this state that God conducts God's kingdom. God has no partialities, no religious differences, and no prejudices based on skin color, whether it be black, red, white, or yellow. In God's kingdom, there is no fighting. And I'll move to an additional one. Let's see, because we've touched on the whole issue of difference between men and women. The question, should there be equality between men and women? Bauer answers, what is the difference between man and woman? The only difference is the body. There is no difference in their life or in their wisdom or in the lights of their eyes. There is no difference in their love. There is no difference at all in their qualities or actions, in their speech or learning, in their mind or desire, in the light or the truth within them. What is a man? A true man is one who has no torpor or desire. Therefore, God is the only true man, since the rest of us have both torpor and desire. The only real difference between man and woman lies in certain anatomical parts. But when it comes to what they really are, there is no difference. So those are some of the things, Amitabh, that I just wanted to share. And as it turned out, we had touched on some of these things. And so I'm happy that I had selected those beforehand so that I could share them with our audience.
So appropriate, really. Everything that you said today, we all take to heart. It was memorable for me, and I'm sure everyone, to have spent this precious time with you. And really, we all appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts that you gave us this time, your wisdom, and your heart. Thank
and I
you
so
again.
appreciate you having me on this wonderful program. And I look forward to seeing the new film. And I am so happy that I learned right before we came onto the broadcast that you were a student of Pir Bilal Khan and Hazrat Inayat Khan. So clearly we are deeply related, and this was meant to be.
We're flowing in the same stream, but all the streams flow into the same ocean. So yes, Pir Vilayat Khan gave me my name, Amartat. That's how I got my name, just as Sheikh Bawa gave you your name.
Yes, yes.
And so
Wonderful.
to our audience, please share this Sunseed Wisdom Talk with your dear ones. It will continue to stream on Facebook and YouTube. And you can also access it from our website, sunseed.org wisdom talks. And while you're there, please visit our guru shop. We have sustainable merchandise from artisans around the world. We have a new set of beads that you're going to love. And it's those guru purchases actually that help pay for our free wisdom talk. So it will help further our efforts here as well. And one final word, as I mentioned before, keep watching your emails. So if you're not on our email list, go now and subscribe. You can go to sunseed.org and subscribe, because next month we're going to kick off and make some announcements about our new movie, the sequel to Sunseed: The Journey, to be announced next month. We're going to kick off with a crowdfunding campaign. We really would love to have you be part of this new venture with us, and we believe it's going to be spectacular. So good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. Good night or good morning. May you all be blessed. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom Aleichem, Namaste, Jai Ram, Om, and may the long time sun seed shine upon you.